Welcome back to the Get Off the Treadmill podcast for practice owners and leaders, where we are obsessed with how to build a successful practice and get a life too. Hi, I'm Chuck Blakeman, and we're going to dive into another topic that helps us make more money in less time, get off the treadmill, and rehumanize dentistry by giving everybody their brain back. Today, we've got Dr. Mark Costas with us. He's the founder of over a dozen successful practices, and he's got 8 right now that he's working with. He is the author of the international #1 best-selling book, Pillars of Dental Success, in its 2nd edition, host of the Dentalpreneur podcast, and most recently a founder of the Dental Success Network. Mark and his wife, Leslie, have 3 sons, Bryce, Brandon, and Brady, and they live in Prescott, Arizona. I'm thrilled to have you with me today, Dr. Costas. Let's get after it.
Let's do this, Chuck. Good to see you.
Good to see you, my friend. So what I'd like to do is I got a framework in my head for this thing today, since you and I both like to wing this stuff.
Yeah.
In my first book, I talked about in Making Money is Killing Your Business, I talked about the 4 building blocks of a great practice. The big why, a strategic plan, what we call freedom mapping, which is really systemizing your practice. And the 4th one is outside eyes. Get somebody else who has no dog in the hunt to talk with you about this. So let's kind of walk through those things and use your experience to do this, because as you can see behind me, this is about getting dentists off the treadmill. And we don't want to just build a faster treadmill. That's way too often what happens is, hey, let me teach you how to build to make a bunch more money. That's not going to make it by itself. Let's start with the big why. So you went through, give us a little bit of your story that you might have given us on an earlier podcast, but give us a little bit of your story about how you crashed and burned over the idea that you could just make a buttload of money and be happy.
Yeah, it's funny. Because I had such a difficult time learning disabilities, attention disorders, all growing up. I was not the best student in the world, so it took me some time to get into dental school. So I was 3 years behind my peers. So when I finally did get into dental school, I felt as though that I had some catching up to do. So I always, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking multiple practice ownership. This is going to be a way that I can accelerate my retirement timeline, and catch up with my classmates that were 3 years ahead of me in the timeline here. So I got out of dental school, did a year of associateship. After 12 months, I bought my first practice, which in the first year ended up being 3 practices. And then in the first 7 years, I was up to 6 practices. What I talked about last time in the podcast was that I had this arbitrary goal in my head that was $1 million in the bank, and I wanted to net $1 million. So I had a very, very tactical, very, very clear goal, and it was $1 million and $1 million. I didn't think about anything else at the time because that seemed like a reasonable goal. A lot of people have, a monetary goal. That's how they keep score. When I got to my 6th practice.
Let me stop you there, because the working assumption you were probably working with came out of the industrial age that if you make a bucket load of money, you will be happy. So $1 million and $1 million, let's go.
That's it. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And that's what I thought at the time. And then I got there. We had the 6 practices. One day, I opened up my laptop. My CPA had emailed me, and he said, check your tax return for any errors. I'm going to submit it electronically. So I opened up my laptop and I said, oh my gosh, first time in my life, there it was. I made that $1 million, shut my laptop, and had a very, very reflective time, because I realized that I'd never been more unhappy in my life. I was not fulfilled in any way, and my relationships were on the rocks, and my kids weren't a big part of my life at the time, because everything was work. Everything was focused on this monetary goal, this financial goal that I had in mind. So I sold the four of the 6 practices and rebooted. I reset everything. And like I said before, I defined all of my non-negotiables, and I did that. This is great. These 4 building blocks are great, because I had to recognize why I was doing all of it. I had to recalibrate everything. And really what I was doing it for was to try to be a great provider for my family. And, with the best intentions at heart, I was actually pushing them away. Right. So the big why is making sure that I'm a good provider, but at the same time that I have the balance and the focus and the attention for them at the same time.
Yeah. A good big why always has those relationships in there, because those are the things we'll take with us, the memories and the relationships. we say there's three things that you build a big why on. One is making money is not an empowering vision. It might get you so far, but you're a great example of that. As soon as you got to $1 million, it was no longer carrying you. There was nothing empowering about that. The second one is that a goal realized is no longer motivating. And you showed that one in spades. Okay, I got there. Now what? And then the third one is we are made to do and to be something significant our whole lives. Let's figure out how we continue to make impact. And once you have this machine running that's a million, you're kind of out. You're done. It's over. So you showed all three of those in spades, and you went back and rebooted, and you decided there was something bigger than dentistry. I say it on the back of my book, use your practice to build your ideal lifestyle.
Yes.
And I think that's what I hear in spades that you learned from that was I was using my lifestyle, I was using my family and everything around me to build my practice.
Right.
And you had to reboot and turn that all around. And now I'm using the practice to get me what I need in the rest of my life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, there's no material object that I was able to purchase when we finally realized that 7-figure mark that made me any happier. It's funny, you know, we reflected all the time. My wife and I would talk during this difficult time that we were having. Gosh, you know, we were more happy in dental school when we had like a negative $250,000 net worth. Yeah. We were happier when we were dating before we even got into dental school, when we were living in a 300 square foot apartment, you know? Yeah. So it really, really does come down to having to, define what it is that you're here for. What's your greater purpose beyond cash? Because there really, really isn't much satisfying about that. And just a monetary goal will not push you through the hardest times. And there are a lot of hard times in business.
Well, we don't have a lot of time for this stuff, but let me give our listeners just one tool to help them understand how to get a big why. Our definition of a big why is a goal that you can never check off as complete.
Oh, I like that.
You could check off $1 million and $1 million. It was done. And it's realized, and now what? But you can never check off being a great dad, a great husband, building those memories, that kind of stuff. That's a goal you can never check off as complete. That's the kind of thing that will motivate us to build a great practice, to use the practice so that we can get those things.
Chuck, I love that sentiment so much. I really, really appreciate the way that you put that.
Yeah, and that's building block number one. And I find a lot of times, most of the time when I go into practices and when you go into to help people, I'm sure you find out that most of the thinking on this big why stuff is very short term. It's about the cash or the practice or something that they'll actually be able to obtain, and then they'll find there's an empty thing on the other side of this. So that's pillar number one. That's building block number one. Building block number two is if you have a big why, now you need a plan for getting there. This is not a business plan. This is bigger than a business plan. Okay, I have something bigger than my practice I want to get to. What is my strategic plan for using the practice to get where I want to go? And how long do I think that should take? So you rebuild a vision of what you want that is inclusive of all those things that's not dentistry. And then you figure out how long you think that should take you, and you do a little work back plan on that. We use a 2-page strategic plan to do that, but any plan you have to do that will get you where you need to go. So give us a little more information on how you rebuilt your plan to include the rest of your life.
You know, it's funny. It was almost by accident. I created this company called the Horizon Schools of Dental Assisting during this period of time. I sold my 4 practices and I went on a quest to find something that was a little bit more passive, a little bit less reliant on my 2 hands, so that I could create a little bit more space between how I earn my money and how I spent my hours, so that I wasn't trading dollars for hours. Because even if you're the most successful dentist in the world, you're still trading dollars for hours.
Yeah, you got 168 hours. There's a ceiling right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I founded this company called the Horizon Schools of Dental Assisting. So we figured out a way to turn everybody's facility into a teaching facility after the practice was closed. Nice. So I created my own dental assisting school in one of my practices and then started selling a license across the country to other dentists. We have almost 200 locations now of the Horizon Schools of Dental Assisting, right? So that was part of my plan to be able to liberate myself from the actual chair time. I still love to do dentistry, but it gave me a little bit more, it gave me more options. And then the multiple practice ownership, once we learned how to systemize a practice, once we created this franchise prototype, like Michael Gerber says, once we created this systemized template that we could just replicate over and over and over again, then we started building the practice group up again. And now I speak a lot on stages, and I have clients that I get to go to their practices and I become a part of their lives. Now I realize that my purpose is more about helping people to avoid that period of life that I was in. And I find so many of my colleagues nudging up against the challenges that I had. So my greater purpose now, my big why, my strategic plan is to go out there and make passive income with more of my other companies so that I can go out and do what I'm truly passionate about, and that's helping dentists to realize their full potential.
Very cool. We all need a plan, and too often we don't have a plan, and the reason we don't have a plan is because we don't even know where we're going. We don't have a why.
Sure.
So we need the plan. And the basis of a good plan is to figure out what is the one big thing you need to get done this year. There's always 7. And my experience after building 12 businesses in 8 industries was every time I took on more than 2 or 3 things, I got nothing done. So we narrow it down. We want one thing every year. What is the one big thing that we have to accomplish this year? And we put everything else underneath that, and it gives us great focus. So that's a great way to think about building block number 2. Building block number 3 is what we call freedom mapping. And it's the idea of using processes and systems, mapping your processes, but doing it in a way, the reason we call it freedom mapping is because we talk about everybody in the practice should be in their highest and best use of their time. That makes us the most money. That makes them the happiest. There's no, everybody wins there. So how do we develop the processes, and then how do we ensure that everybody is involved in those processes in a way that gets the best out of them? But we need processes and we need systems. We need a plan. We need a big why. We need a plan. And then we need the processes. And it's the processes. You talk about this in your book, Pillars of Dental Success, that it's the processes. That's where the rubber meets the road. That third building block, you will never get off the treadmill. Even if you have a big why and a great plan, you will not get off the treadmill if you don't have great processes that get this out of your head, through your heart, out your hands, onto a piece of paper, so somebody else can do it. So give us some ideas of how you've done that and what that's meant for your practices to systemize. I know you're a big fan of this stuff.
Absolutely. I think the reason I was able to build my first 6 practices was not because I had great systems, and not because I read your book and I was doing this freedom mapping exercise. In fact, I had a staff dependent organization. Staff dependent organization. I was lucky enough to have all-stars throughout my organization, but the problem with all-stars is that sometimes they leave. Sometimes their husbands get job transfers. Sometimes they retire. Sometimes they switch industries.
So take the knowledge with them.
What's that?
They take the knowledge with them.
That's right. And if your business is dependent on these all-stars, I call that a staff dependent model.
That's
now,
great.
A systems dependent model means that your staff or your all-stars run through the same system that everybody else does in the organization, right? So there is a standard that everybody must keep, just like you said, goes through your head, out your hands, onto a piece of paper. And the way that you do things is written down. The expectations are very crystal clear. Everybody does things according to a process, not according to how they did it at their previous job, not according to what they just made up on the fly, according to what we've all agreed is the best way to do it. And that is freedom. It's a great title for step number 3 in your process, freedom mapping, because it really is freedom. It's liberty.
Yeah, it was interesting when I always did this in my own businesses, and 15 years ago when I started helping others, I was surprised they weren't doing these kinds of things. But then we just intuitively started doing it with an emphasis on how the process impacts the human being. And I just assumed that was normal. And then I looked around the internet and for a year or two, looked at everybody who does process mapping. I couldn't even find a sentence that had anything to do with the people. it's how do we get this assembly line to run faster, and who gives a rat's rear end what impact it has on the people around them. You can get the assembly line to run faster better if you pay attention to the people first and say, what will I actually accomplish for them? How will they be better off if we put this process in place? Every time, and the research verifies this, when you put the people first, they figure out the production, but you put them last and it doesn't work out as well. So freedom mapping, the reason we call it that is we want the emphasis to be on not just the process and you're a cog in this machine, but we're going to help you develop a process that gets you where you are doing things here at this practice that add your value in the highest and best use of your time.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. You know, that might be a remnant of the Industrial Revolution when we're talking about, you know, this assembly line type model and just kind of discounting the importance of, you know, how rewarding the workplace is and how important the team is to the success of your operation in dentistry, more so than in most other industries I can think of.
Oh, it's so true. There's so much of what we do in dentistry on the business side, especially, that came directly from factories. We call it the factory system model. Most of dentistry is run on the factory system model. I talked about this in my second book, Why Employees Are Always a Bad Idea. We don't want employees. We want stakeholders. We want self-managed adults who come to work and give it everything they've got. But we don't really expect that. We don't know how to get them there. The factory system model plugs them in as cogs of a machine, as extensions of a machine, and teaches them, don't bring your brain to work. We don't even want you to bring that piece. Just bring the part that answers the phone or hands me the tool and leave the rest of you at home. It's dehumanizing. And in fact, my third book that is done, it's in the can. It'll be a few months until it comes out, but it's called Rehumanizing Dentistry by Giving Everybody Their Brain Back. Because that's the real problem here, is that we've forgotten how to do that. And you're dead on. So much of what we've got, Mark, came right out of the factory.
I just love the titles of all of your books. How do you come up with this stuff, Chuck? I mean,
I don't know. I think I'm a little bit tainted. I think I have a problem. But I actually have another book in the can that we haven't released yet. It's called Bad Plans Carried Out Violently: How Real Leaders Lead and Succeed in the Real World. It's not with a good plan. It's with a bad plan. And the word violent in the Latin, violentus, actually means with utmost conviction and utter commitment. That's what it's not about beating somebody up, but it's this steely-eyed, get out of my way, I've got somewhere I need to be. That kind of violence. Get a plan and carry it out with that kind of violence, and you're much more likely to be successful. Well, I'm telling that because if you line my books up, the first one is Making Money is Killing Your Business, and the word killing is really big. I didn't design this, but obviously I proved it. Then the second one, Why Employees Are Always a Bad Idea. And the word always is the big one. So you got killing and always. And the third one, he has it designed so that the word violently is big. So you line them up, it's always killing violently. Somebody needs some help. I'm not sure who it is, him or me, but we got a problem here. So yeah, I've always put snarky titles in my, I think people remember them better. But they're not just snarky. They really do mean something. I really do believe that the pursuit of making money will kill your practice.
Yeah, I mean, how can you read? You can't read those titles and not have to read those books. It's genius.
Yeah.
They're
or
great.
At least pick them up. At least pick them up and say, what the heck?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And people say I'm counterintuitive. I'm not. I'm counterlogical. It's very intuitive. This stuff is very intuitive.
Yeah.
But it does run against a lot of what we're taught in the MBA courses. Like you said, they didn't teach hardly anything about strategic planning there. There's what we do in our business is very counterintuitive. Well, so those are the first three building blocks is get a big why, figure out why you're doing this, something you can never check off as complete. Get a plan for including your practice and getting you to that, something you can revise on a regular basis that's rolling and dynamic. And then the third one is get the stuff out of your head and get it out of other people's heads so that you can systemize what's going on so that you can get past the difficulties faster and better. The fourth one is outside eyes. And this one I violated in wholesale for my first 5 businesses. I am a recovering John Wayne rugged individualist. When I did my first 5 businesses, every time I printed a business card, it's like, I got this. I don't need any help. And when people ask me, how's business? Business is great. I'm dying inside, but I can't tell you that. I'm waking up in cold sweats at 2 a.m. I can't tell you that either. I really don't know what I'm doing, but I got this. And I can't imagine how much time and energy and emotion and money I wasted because I was too proud to get help. And it finally broke with my sixth business. And it's one of those big duhs, like a V8 moment. Why didn't I do this earlier? So outside eyes, getting somebody who has no dog in the hunt has become a real pillar, one of the 4 building blocks that I see really successful people get involved in. Talk about your experience with that and how you help people with that and how you've been helped by that concept of outside eyes.
Man, we are kindred spirits. I can't tell you, this one is probably my favorite because dentistry from an insider's perspective, and you have one as well, dentists are very, very isolated and closed off. By nature, the profession is just that way.
Yeah.
When you're talking about these local study groups, people are always scared to share. Outside of clinical tips, everybody's terrified to share and be vulnerable about how their business really is doing. If they're killing it, they don't want to tell anybody. If they're struggling, they don't want to tell anybody. Yeah. So like we've built this like whole culture in dentistry of just sticking to ourselves and really, really just struggling through all of the challenges of business by ourselves. Yeah. So when I put my consultancy, when I put my coaching group together, I said, I'm going to do this totally differently. We're going to leverage all of the knowledge of all the people in a room. They're going to be people from all over the country. So that whole idea of like this competitive nature is going to evaporate.
Right.
We put everybody in a room and we objectively talk out loud and be vulnerable and share like warts and all what's going on in our business. Great. And together in a room full of, 50 dentists from all over the place, we come up with solutions together. Not me because I'm the smartest guy in the room. Right. I never am the smartest guy in the room. But I'm the smartest guy in the room because I know who to put into a room to solve a problem. If you get 50 people, 50 dentists in a room with 1,000 years of collective dental experience, there's no problem in your business that hasn't been experienced by somebody else. Yeah. And there's no problem that you can't overcome. So outside eyes, I love this one because when you're stuck in your own business, you do not have the ability to step outside and look objectively at what's really going on. And, something that's riddled you for a decade might be solved in 90 seconds when you get around a group.
We've seen that kind of stuff. And let me give the listeners an outside resource on this, a book called The Wisdom of Crowds. It's a fun read, but it basically helps you see the value of putting 10 people in a room. And the reality of it is you can have one expert and 9 people who don't know anything about the problem, and they have a much better chance of solving the problem than 10 experts do. So getting into a room where you have that kind of diversity, and we all admit we don't know what we're doing, but it's a fun read, and it gives people an understanding of how valuable it is to get into a room with other people. We're mammals. We're made to live in community. And I learned that really later in life after 20 years of business that I should be asking other people, what do you think of this? And see what they get. Well, those are our 4 building blocks. Hopefully that's going to be helpful to our listeners in a real concrete way. Tell us how they can get a hold of you, Mark, and take advantage of what you do with the podcast, with your book, with your mastermind.
Yeah, thank you so much. So my website is truedentalsuccess.com. I'm very active on social media, Facebook, Dental Success Institute, Instagram, Dental Success Institute. You can patch in every day. We have a 5-day-a-week podcast, the Dentalpreneur Podcast, mostly focusing on the business side of dentistry. We have live events all the time. We have 4 live events, one big one every year called the Dental Success Summit. The next one is coming up in April of 2019. So a number of different ways to reach out. I'm very, very responsive. So if you guys have any questions or just want to connect, I'm out there.
Well, there he is, Dr. Mark Costas, in the flesh and with us today. We're thrilled to have you. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us. If you haven't connected with Mark, please do. I think he'll be able to change some things in your practice and maybe even in your life. Thanks for being part of what we're doing here today, and we'll look forward to having you back, Mark.
Thank you so much, Chuck. It was great.
If this podcast was helpful, please subscribe by computer or by phone, or connect with us at www.gottsummit.com, 2 T's, G-O-T-T summit.com. That stands for Get Off the Treadmill. We have those summits quarterly for dental practitioners only. or connect with us at www.chuckblakeman.com or email us at grow@cranksetgroup.com. Let's get off that treadmill. Let's get into the participation age. I look forward to seeing you in the next podcast. Thanks.